Hi, I'm Dolly Vasta. Welcome back to Dolly's World. In the spring, we think of everything as new fashions. Fashions in clothing, fashions in footwear. But what about fashions in flowers? I thought it would make a great show. We could call it Flower Power. Now, if that doesn't bring back some memories to some of you out there, nothing will. Today we're at Ferris Farms on Cranberry Road in East Brunswick, and with me is co-owner and manager, jack of all trades, Mike Rotowski. And we're going to wander through, I call this Never Never Land. I love to come here. Whenever I'm down the dumps, you can find me here. But Mike, welcome to the show, and we're standing in the middle of the geranium patch at the moment, I take it.
Yes, we are.
And you have here their hybrids. What makes a hybrid from a lowbred?
Well, there's different types of geraniums. What we call hybrids basically are the cutting type geraniums. They're grown from cuttings rather than from seed. Seed geraniums are usually more economical. You can buy them like in little 6-packs. They're usually cheaper because they're grown from seed. These types, the ones we call the hybrids, even though they're not, they kind of are hybrids. Usually when you talk about hybrids, you're talking about seeds, but the cutting varieties are actually grown from cuttings. The only way you can really reproduce them is by taking cuttings off the plant, rooting them, and growing them on. The reason a lot of people like these, and the reason we sell so many of them, you can see how large and how full the flowers are. The seed geraniums, on the other hand, they do get a large flower on them too, but it's a little different type of petal. And a lot of times when the rain hits them, it just knocks all the flowers off. And they have to grow brand new flowers. So sometimes for part of the season, they really don't have any flowers on them because when the rain hits them or if you water them too hard, it just knocks the petals off. These just get a big fuller flower and they last a lot longer.
They're stronger.
Yeah, oh yeah, they are. And they just keep growing larger and larger, and they just do, we just grow all kinds of different colors of them.
They're wonderful. All right, Mike, now we're in the hanging basket area here. Tell me a little bit about hanging baskets. There are tricks and there's some new little gimmicks to do with your hanging baskets. You can really go crazy this summer.
Oh, sure. There's all new varieties of plants that have come on the market in the last few years, some from Europe, some from Australia. All new different types of colors, and hanging baskets are great because a lot of people don't have areas to plant in their yards. A lot of people live in condos, apartments, but everybody can find a spot for a hanging basket.
Right.
on your patio, on your deck, under your eaves. And the good thing about hanging baskets, at least in the last few years, is that years ago we used to grow hanging baskets all one type, like all one type of petunia, all one type of impatiens. Over the last few years, the trend is make mixtures of all different flowers. And at first, I wasn't very comfortable with that. I didn't like the way they looked. But now, with some of these newer varieties, how the colors blend so well and how they flow, it's becoming very, very popular. Probably our most popular hanging baskets are these mixed baskets of all different types of colors and foliage.
Okay, but there are some rules when you put together baskets.
Yeah. Well, the main thing is, as with any plant, you don't want to, one thing I learned at school is you never fight the site. You never put a plant in an area where it's not going to grow. And the first thing you want to consider is how much light a plant's going to get. If you plant the wrong plant in a very shady area, something that likes bright light, it's just really not going to do too well. So we kind of design our baskets based on how much sunlight they're going to need. So we have two different divisions, things that like a lot of sun or a large amount of light, and things that could grow very well in shade or low amounts of light. So you don't want to mix your containers. Let's say if you're going to mix a lot of different flowers, you don't want to mix sunny stuff with shade stuff, because in one area it may do well, in the other area it doesn't. You really want the whole basket to grow and just flourish.
What about the moisture content of the basket? Now, some flowers do not need as heavy a moisture as other flowers, so you can't really put those together either. You really have to look at the tags when you pick up the plants. Yeah,
you do. I mean, we usually tell people as far as watering, and I would think watering, at least from the comments I get from people, and I hear all the problems they have in actually growing stuff. Their biggest problem is knowing when to water and when not to water, and overwatering, and sometimes even underwatering. And like you said, some plants require a lot more water and others don't. the way we get around it, we try to use soil mixes that hold on to a lot of moisture, but as they dry out, they can hold on to a lot of extra moisture when they need it, and then it's easier for you to tell if they need watering. We basically, here what we do, since we use a lightweight soil mix, when it's well watered, the basket's very heavy. So before we water anything, who's ever working here, we pick up every basket actually from the bottom. We'll pick it up, and if it feels heavy, we don't water it for that day. We'll wait until the next day. If it feels a little light, we water it very thoroughly. And if you water it very thoroughly, it's a very lightweight soil mix, and there's still a lot of open pores in the soil. So the roots actually do very well in this type of a soil mix. We never recommend people using like topsoil or something like that in their containers. It's much too heavy, and you just don't get the air in the root system that the plants really need to thrive. But really watering, as long as you water the right way, it's really not that big of a deal if you can figure out how much to water and when to water. And again, it's as easy as picking a basket up. If it feels heavy, let it go, and it starts to feel light, water it thoroughly.
Well, you know, I happen to like, and this is only my personal viewpoint, but our coleus, and I like them mixed in things. I find you have to keep pinching them back. Well, at the top.
Some of the old, now this is one of the newer varieties of coleus. Some of the older varieties that people are used to, the ones in the little 6-packs, and they grow maybe about that high, and they'd get seed heads on them. Like you said, you have to pinch them. If you didn't pinch them, they kind of spindly, and they didn't do too well. These are the newer ones that are grown from cuttings. We talked before about cutting geraniums.
Right.
These are the cutting coleus. These aren't grown from seed. They're grown from vegetative cuttings. In other words, we take little pieces off the plant and we actually root them. But this plant, if put into a ground, by the end, it grows gigantic, and they do flower, but the flowering really doesn't affect them, and they just keep growing, and the leaves get bigger and lusher. And again, it's one of these newer varieties from Europe that we've acquired over the last few years, and it's really great for summer. It really thrives in heat, and it's good for sun or shade.
Well, I used them up on the hill, and I mixed them with hosta last summer.
Oh, okay.
And they really did get big, and they were beautiful, and they lasted till a frost.
Yeah. Oh, they'll just keep keep growing. And if they get too tall, they're good, and you can even cut them back. If you shear them back, it'll actually just make them denser. So you could control the height of them just by pinching them back.
All righty.
Okay.
As I say, I happen to love the colored leaves. That happens to be personal.
There's all different colors of those.
Yes, they're really gorgeous, and they come in all different colors. And over here, you have another pretty basket. You know what this says to me? This says really spring. The yellow, no really, doesn't it? The yellow, the red, the white.
Yep, that's a mixture, if I can show you real quick.
Sure.
This is,
let me get this.
And again, this would be considered a sun basket because what we picked for this is everything that's great for the sun. This is red verbena, a trailing verbena. This, I believe, is some called Bidens, which is a really neat plant. We planted it out in front of our sign for a number of years in a row, and it grows, it mounds, and it can actually even take a frost. We've had these things blooming well after our mums were gone in the fall, but in this case, in these mixed baskets, it makes a really good plant. And then we also have some called a calabricoa, which is kind of like a miniature petunia, and then also some mini petunias too. So there's probably about 6 or 7 actual different plants in here, all good for the sun. And if somebody hung this in a good bright area, this plant is eventually going to get big and just full and just kind of just flow the whole season. As long as it's watered and let dry slightly, no problems. They just keep going the whole season.
What about deadheading? And maybe we ought to explain what deadheading is also.
Okay, deadheading a lot of times is just as plants flower, and no flower lasts forever. They continue to flower. But deadheading is just when you see a bad flower on a plant, just kind of grabbing it by the, this is called a petiole, which actually is where the flower is attached to the plant. We just kind of pinch those off. And what that does by deadheading, a lot of the energy that would go into making seeds for the plant, which really takes a lot of energy out of the plant, actually goes back into the plant. Now, it's not on the plant anymore, so all that energy that the leaves are making goes back into the plant, and it produces all these brand new flowers. So if you have the time and the effort to put into it, to deadhead, it does make a difference in how much your plants will flower. Although a lot of these newer varieties, you really don't have to. They just bloom so much, the dead flowers fall off. It's really not a problem whatsoever. But for things like geraniums, really large, big, showy flowers, it is good to deadhead. And if you have the time to do it, it really will produce a much better flowering plant. You'll get a lot more flowers off of it.
Doesn't that also apply to petunias? And you have a new petunia,
Okay.
which I hope to get to
Okay.
this morning.
Well, there's a new class of petunias. Years
Okay.
ago, we had,
Right.
again, petunias from seeds. And there's a new class of petunias called, you can call them trailing petunias, spreading petunias. But they have the ability, rather than just kind of growing in the summer and getting tall and straggly, these have the ability to really just spread, and they just keep blooming the whole season. You really don't even have to deadhead those. I mean, most people don't have the time to, they like to plant stuff, they like to see stuff flower, so they really want low maintenance plants. And some of these newer plants, like the wave petunias, like the super petunias, these are some of these newer varieties. These are bred, I guess, genetically and reproduced so that when you plant them, they just go. They just spread as long as they're in a good sunny, well-drained soil. If they're in the ground, or in a good well-drained soil, if they're in a container, they just keep growing and blooming basically the whole season.
I want to pick up on an expression you used, wave, because if you watch any of the television shows on gardening, they talk about planting a wave, and it's really looks like a wave. It's heavy in like a wave form.
You mean as coming out of containers, or you mean just like in the landscape?
In the ground, when you're
Okay.
landscaping, they call it plant a wave.
That probably means, I mean, in some respects, these mixed containers look good because there's all different types of things in them, but something that usually makes a better statement in the landscape is when you plant maybe one type of plant or one type of color in mass.
In mass.
When it's in mass and it's growing and it's flowing and it's flowering, it really is impressive. Your eye is like just totally drawn to it, from a distance away, and then when you get up close, it even looks really nice also. But yeah, some people, there's all different types of design aspects in flowers and in landscaping, but that's a trend too. A lot of people like to just do stuff in mass, and if it's done the right way, spaced out, and you let them grow, it could be very beautiful. I mean, you've probably seen them usually at estates or when you go to parks and things. They tend to do that. Most people around the home may do that, but I find that most people like to plant all different kinds of things. They want to experiment with different things. They want to try different things out.
But the summer is the time to do that, or the spring, which we're really in, but it's still warm here. Because if it doesn't work out, so then you plant something else.
Yeah, there's always another season.
There's another season.
Yeah, there's always another season.
And you might come across something that's really exciting. That's what always gets me.
And that's what happens to people too. People come up to us all the time. Oh, I planted this Biden's last year. It was tremendous. That's the best plant ever. And so they'll plant it again. But by experimenting, they probably find something else that's just as fine. Because everybody's home is different. Everybody's soil is different. You can have a neighborhood, and depending upon who built the house, you can have 5 different types of soil types within that neighborhood. So if you're planting in the ground, a lot of times something that does well for one person may not do well for the other person. So experimenting really does make a big difference. You find something that does well, and you stick with it.
Oh my, who do we have here? Hey, Danny, how you doing? To all of you out there, this is Dan Mikorsky. He is the other owner of Ferris Farms, and he's always busy doing things like this. He told me he did not want to talk, so just go do your own thing. Mike, so many people today are either buying bare-boned brand new homes that the developer uses these little skimpy things on, or else they're older homes like mine, 50 years old, and maybe there have been a lot of landscaping mistakes made over the years, and stuff has gotten too big, and unfortunately, it has to come out. All right, what is the proper thing when you are starting a garden of shrubs? It really is a sculpture. In other words, really tall, medium.
Yeah. Well, just like art, there's certain design principles. Definitely, there's actual design principles in landscaping. In fact, the field of landscape architecture, which a lot of colleges and which Rutgers also offers, that's what it's all about. Design principles, and certain things look good if done in a certain way, and a lot of things don't look good if they're done in a certain way. Most people don't understand the rules. Let's face it, they have their own jobs, their own interests, and a lot of times people just kind of try to replicate what they see at other people's houses, whether it's good or not. But yeah, in order for something really to look well, it should be designed properly, and one of the things are, and and I would think it's kind of a common, simple thing, but a lot of people don't realize is that you should have, taller things in the background
Right.
and shorter things in the foreground. And where a lot of people kind of get messed up in that is that they don't realize, they may realize they want something tall in the back and short in the front, but when
they buy it
they're
differently.
looking at plant material, when they're looking at plants, they're looking at what it looks like right then and there. And often the plant is only maybe 1, 2, or 3 years old, and 10 years from now, what's it going to look like? And that's where they goof up. And what they really have to investigate or kind of check out is how big is that plant going to get. And in fact, a lot of the shrubs that we bring in now, we try to put tags on that they'll tell you the mature, not only the height but the width. Because another big problem that most people do, they'll get plants and they jam them close together. They want them to look good immediately.
Yeah.
And it will look good for 1 or 2 or 3 years, but then all that expensive stuff you just put in, you're going to wind up ripping it out because the plants want to grow to their natural width and their natural height. And a lot of people will try to shear them back and try all kind of crazy things, but it really doesn't lend itself well to those plants. They really want to grow the way that they want to grow, and that's when they look the most beautiful, is when you pretty much can just let them grow to where they want to go. So you really should know, first of all, how tall and how wide the plant is. And just like we talked before too about sun plants and shade plants, you also want to know what's going to do well in the sun and what's going to do well in the shade, because let's face it, the sun doesn't go around your house equally. You have a shady spot and then you have a sunny spot, and you want to know the characteristics of that plant, what's good for the sun and what's good for the shade. And if you know that, and you have some basic design principles, which nowadays you can get so much stuff off the internet.
Yes, yeah.
The Rutgers Cooperative Extension, they're on the web. They have so many things available, so many brochures and documents that you could kind of figure out a lot of this stuff and do your homework ahead of time.
The best plants I have found, it goes with everything, it grows every year, and it just gets huge, the hosta.
Yeah, hosta is a very good plant. It's a lot of people in our area, East Brunswick, a lot of older mature houses, a lot of trees, a lot of shade. A lot of people have problems in what they can plant in the shade. And a lot of times you're limited. There's azaleas, there's rhododendrons, there's these things that are used, but they don't lend a lot of color to the garden except for azaleas and rhodies when they're flowering. But things like hostas can tolerate a lot of shade, and they come in a lot of different colors.
The green with the yellow tips, and then you have the reverse, the yellow with the green tips, and the blues. And some of them have very fragrant flowers. I think the blue one has a white that has the most wonderful fragrance.
Yeah, there's tons of different varieties. It's almost like tomatoes, where there's hundreds of different types of tomatoes and everybody has a favorite. Hostas, there's hosta associations where they grow so many different varieties.
Now, Mike, these are the herbs, and you have a huge herb selection here. So look at the different shades if you want to work them all together.
Yeah, same thing. Years ago, the main herbs were things like parsley, maybe a little bit of basil. Nowadays, with all the different types and varieties of mints, they've come up with some of these lost varieties that have all different colors, and they're edible, but they're also very colorful. This here, I believe, is a kind of sage. That's a golden sage.
That is so pretty.
Yeah, it probably doesn't taste as good as the regular sage, but it does have that really attractive color. And what a lot of people are doing nowadays, rather than just planting them in their garden and using them as a vegetable, just clipping them back, a lot of people are growing them in containers, window boxes, where they're readily available, they're very easily grown, and they can mix. You could just imagine if you mixed a lot of these types of colorful things together in a big container or a nice window box, where things like thyme can trail over and the sage can grow upright and the dill can grow upright. You can actually have something that looks great and something that tastes great. And when it comes time to cook, you just run out there and snip off whatever you need, and you've got it made.
Well, one of my favorite of these is the pineapple mint. That in iced tea is probably one of the best things.
Okay, yeah.
Out of this world, it really is. You can also mix these with certain flowers too.
Yeah, a lot.
and match.
Yeah, because some of this stuff is so pretty in window boxes and planters, a lot of people are doing that. But the only thing you want to be very concerned about if you're going to be mixing with flowers is that maybe later on in the season, sometimes you may be winding up with some little critters like insects and things. And if you're in a habit of using insecticides or different chemicals on them, you want to make sure that you're not going to be eating the stuff that you're using on your flowers if you have herbs mixed in. In fact, that's a big question a lot of people have. I have herbs, I have window box herbs, and I'm starting to get some bugs on them. What should I do? Probably the easiest thing to do, if you have like a pot or a window box of herbs, usually the main insect you're going to get on them is something called an aphid. And aphid's like a real tiny little insect, and they usually feed on undersides of the leaves. They feed on the growing tips of the leaves, and they're all over the place. A lot of people may never have seen an aphid, but if you ever parked your car underneath a tree and you get sap on the windshield, and you think, "Oh, the darn tree! I'm getting sap from the tree," that's actually from the aphid. The aphids are feeding on the trees, and what they excrete is something called honeydew, which is like a very sweet material that drops on the windshields. And a lot of times you could tell you're having an insect problem if you ever pick something up and the leaves feel sticky. It's probably from something like an aphid. But for something you're going to eat, of course you don't want to use chemicals on it, because once you spray something, you may have to wait maybe 7 days before you can eat it. And the herbs grow so quick and you want to use them, you don't want to do that. So what I usually recommend that people do is, if it's grown in a pot or even in a planter, if you have a hose that reaches out to where you got to go, just take something as simple as a nozzle, maybe kind of grab the foliage just to hold it, and just take that nozzle and you know what? You could knock 90% of them off. And a lot of times if you do that, especially if they're outside, a lot of times nature, there's things like ladybugs and other insects around that will actually eat the aphids. But if you can keep them at bay that way, they're still edible. You haven't used any chemicals on them, and sometimes it's just as effective as using chemicals. What they also have, in case it's an infestation that you can't control, you want to use something safe. Usually what we recommend is something called pyrethrins, which are very safe to use around people, and usually they even have mixtures of pyrethrins with, this one happens to have pyrethrins in canola oil. Oil is something that when you spray it on the plant, it's not really toxic or anything to the plant. It's not toxic to us, but it smothers the insects, and it's a very easy way of getting rid of insects and still being able to eat the herb maybe 2 or 3 days later, if you have to use something as harsh as a chemical. That's just another way to go about it.
And while we're here, because hanging here, and we're trying to beat the rain today because it looks like it's coming in, are these. And these are just so great. And I'm trying to think, their name just went right out of my mind.
Portulaca, another common name is lost rose. A lot of people are familiar with the older varieties, again, grown from seed, that you would plant in a garden, real skinny, tiny needles. And they're actually in a succulent family, which means if you looked at the leaves compared to everything else, they're very thick, and they can store water. And that's why they're very, people are always asking, I've got a hot sunny area, everything dies, I can't get anything to grow. This is the answer, because this thing can dry out and you can water it and it comes right back, and it thrives in heat. And we don't recommend planting these early in spring. We usually, from end of May on, and we sell them all summer, as do other garden centers. It's just a very, very good plant. These varieties, you can see there's all different colors of them. This is a little different variety. These are grown from cuttings again. They're vegetatively produced, which means we take a cutting and we do something as simple, like I show you real quick. You just kind of snip a piece off. We take the flower off and strip the leaves, and actually we just stick this in some soil, in a pot with some good potting soil, put a baggie over it, keep it in some indirect light where it's not going to heat up, and in a matter of like a week or two, you'll have a bunch of cuttings that you could propagate your own plants with. It's just a very easily grown plant. You really can't go wrong with it.
I kind of think you're vacationing in Mexico or Spain, or, one of these exotic places.
You probably, in the hotter regions of the world, you probably would find this as a plant that's probably growing around. That's where a lot of these plants actually come from.
Well, before we have to go, I do want to kind of hop over, or not hop, amble over to the petunias.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
So come on.
These are the new class of petunias. These are the actual wave petunias, but there's other ones just like it. They've kind of really revolutionized petunias. Petunias used to be grown from seed, and they were kind of tall, straggly things by the end of the summer, and then somebody actually bred these. And the great thing about wave petunias, if you have a good sunny area and plenty of room, these things, you can see how flat and how, this thing, once you get it in the ground, it just spreads and it blooms basically the whole season. They're just unbelievable. And because of this type of petunia, and again, this isn't the only one, there's wave petunias, there's other breeders, there's super petunias, Surfinia petunias, there's all different types that have the same characteristic, they just thrive in hot weather and they spread. The one thing that we found, though, that the only time people can go wrong with these require a lot of fertilizer. We found this out a number of years ago. We were growing them, and boy, they weren't really doing too well. They were kind of yellowish and not flowering too well. And then we checked out the research that that people are always doing, and some guy did an experiment. He found he was trying to see how much fertilizer it would take to kill some of these things. Well, he wound up putting like twice or 3 times as much fertilizer that he normally would, and the things thrived and they bloomed. And we found out if you really fertilize these, and I guess when you really think about it, it only makes sense because these things grow so quick and they flower so much, they really need a lot of extra.
Eat it up. It's like vitamins.
Exactly. They use it up. If you use the same amount of fertilizer on other plants, you'd wind up killing them because too much of something is no good. Just like too many vitamins are no good for us. But with these type of petunias, if you keep them well watered and well fertilized, boy, they just go the whole summer.
Take off.
And they're great for containers, and they'll hang over walls, and it sounds like it's almost too good to be true, but it is a good, very good plant.
They're so pretty.
Well, yeah. The waves have really only about 3 or 4 colors. That's why some of these other breeders have come up with some other types of petunias. This one is here. Let me just show you real quick. This one doesn't grow. This is, I think, a celebrity brand, and it doesn't grow as wide, but it'll grow pretty good. But this one has the characteristic, sometimes the waves will get a little bare in the center as they grow outwards. This one stays real nice and dense, and it doesn't grow as
kind
wide.
Of compact in the middle.
And but it flowers the whole summer. Again, they just really do well in full sun. They could take a little shade, but you really want to give them a lot of sunlight.
What a gorgeous color. What a gorgeous color.
Yeah.
There we go. Yes. I'll just pin it right there.
Yeah, sure.
Well, Mike, listen, our time really is up, and I thank you. I know how busy you are. We've had everything in the world that has come by here while we've been talking.
Sure.
Every truck that has ever been in East Brunswick today.
Bees are flying by
the
our ears.
bees.
Yeah.
That's right. But and again, I know how busy you are, you and Danny, at this time of year. But thank you so much for coming.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure. I always love doing this. Like I said, it's a lot of fun getting out here and talking a little bit.
And talking.
Yeah, it's always good.
Okay. Well, to all of you out there, thank you so much. Again, I've had a ball, but again, this is my second home. So I am very comfortable here. I hope you all enjoyed the show as much as I did doing it. Take care, and I'll see you next time.